Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Big Game Bound. We're into week 13 of the NFL season, and things keep getting stranger and stranger. Let's check out our playbook and show you what we've got lined up for this week's show. Jared Payton joins us from Chicago. What in the world has happened to the Bears? We'll check in with our correspondents in Nashville and Cleveland, discuss the Titans-Brown game. We'll also go to San Francisco, check on our correspondent Kate Rooney to find out what the homeless 49ers are going to do to practice and play for the next couple of weeks. Our big guest, Hall of Fame journalist John Clayton, and the Wizard of Odds, Kenny White, joins us from Las Vegas. We'll start with the insights of Jared Payton. He joins us every week from Chicago. Jared, in the last few days, the Lions fired their head coach and general manager. Jaguars fired their GM. After watching the Packers thump the Bears on Sunday night, how hot are the seats of Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy?
I think they're really hot, Jack. I mean, you start to think about it with this organization and what the Chicago Bears mean to not just the city of Chicago, but also to the NFL being one of those founded franchises. This is not a good look. And I think both guys are feeling the heat a little bit, and especially for Matt Nagy. I mean, when you think about Matt Nagy and why he was brought here by Ryan Pace in this organization, is because of his offensive mindset and the coaching tree that he came from. And we're not seeing the results. And I think that's the hardest part. And, you know, to Nagy's credit, though, Jack, a lot of this comes with not having an offensive line and also probably an established quarterback at that position as well. But, you know, when you're looked at to be a guy that could be a quarterback whisperer, and what was supposed to happen with Mitchell Trubisky here in Chicago, it just never transpired. And so now the Bears are in a hole right now. And a lot of this is looked at Matt Nagy because he runs the offense, and you look at Ryan Pace because he's the guy making the picks. And you know, the biggest issue is going to lie on Ryan Pace's shoulders because he's the one that's selecting these guys. And I think it's going to be a hard few weeks if this Bears team cannot get another W pretty soon, this 5-game losing streak. You never know what can happen, but business here in Chicago, normally firings happen at the end of the season, not during the season.
Can they flip this script, Jarrett? Because at the start of this 5-game slide, there was still hope because the defense was so good, but there were times on Sunday they looked disinterested. Has Nagy lost this team?
I don't know. I've been trying to search and dive into it with people that I know that are around this organization. And, you know, a lot of people are really being closed-lipped. And I can understand why. When you're going through a tough situation like this, it's never easy and trying to find a way out and claw your way out. But, you know, the Bears defense has been the rock of not only this franchise, but for this season. And so anytime that the Bears have struggled on offense, it's been the defense to be able to pick them up. Well, when you're going up against one of the best offenses in the NFL and one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, that's not an easy task. And I think, you know, the Bears really, the defense is just trying to figure out ways to say, how can we keep doing this game after game and not have any help from our offense? And I think they always say bend, don't break. I think what you saw on Sunday Night Football was that defense breaking for a moment because they just didn't have it in them. But credit to the guy that they were playing against. If not the best, my favorite quarterback in the game, Aaron Rodgers, he sliced and diced them, and they had a balanced attack. And you can see definitely his defense is totally different when Akeem Hicks is not in and healthy. And I tell people all the time, just imagine if Eddie Goldman was healthy as well on that defensive line. I think we really see a totally different defense. But right now, their hearts are hurting. They got to find a way to be able to bounce back because they got Detroit coming up this weekend. They can't afford another loss. They're going to still have to be that rock for this organization.
Yeah, especially a loss to Detroit. Jim Harbaugh is a guy that had great success with the 49ers. It hasn't worked out in Ann Arbor. Is he a guy that you think NFL teams should target?
Jack, are you trying to plug this for the Chicago Bears, man? Like, that's what it sounds like you're doing right now. I'll say this. I mean, if you have head coaching experience in the NFL, I think people are always interested. You have to see what's going on. What's going on in Ann Arbor right now, and for, you know, a university with so much history and not being able to get it right there, I just don't know if he has what it takes to be able to jump back into the NFL. I know there are organizations that are thinking about it that would definitely maybe have it in the back of their mind. But for me, if I was an owner, Jim Harbaugh is not coming in that door to be able to turn around, especially a struggling franchise that needs a lot of help.
All right, so we're seeing a lot of teams struggle right now, a lot of coaches on the hot seat. What other teams do you see making coaching changes before the Super Bowl is played?
Oh, I mean, probably some of the names of the coaches that are on the hot seat, Jack. I mean, you look at the Jets, you look at Adam Gase. I think that's a job right there that could definitely be flipped. And it's not just really the losing when it comes to Adam Gase. It's more of the issues that surround him as a coach since he's, taken over in New York. And I just have a problem with that. Some of the storylines, when you have guys that are good, Jamal Adams, you got, other guys that you can, look at. There's just so many different things that are surrounding him that when you talk about losing the locker room, you can't tell me that he hasn't lost that Jets locker room. And so I think that the number one fit right now would be what's going on with the Jets. I think Adam Gase could definitely be gone before the season's over.
Other end of the spectrum, Saints are 7-0 the last 2 years without Drew Brees playing. Is there a better GM head coach combination in the NFL than Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton?
It's amazing, Jack, to see what they've done. I mean, over this time period, they figure out ways, and I think this is what every team is trying to do. And I know, I throw the New England Patriots in there, and I know there's no Tom Brady there anymore. But when you look at, what the Patriots did for such a long time while Brady was at the helm underneath center, and then you look at also defensively what they were able to do, it's pretty much the same when you look at the Saints. I mean, minus all the championships in Foxborough, you see the ability to be able to replace and reload. And it doesn't really matter if a guy doesn't fit in a system somewhere else. They can go to New Orleans and there's a place for them to be able to succeed, and they find ways to bring the best out of their players. And so, every organization is trying to figure out how to do that. The Saints, they have the blueprint, and it's been amazing to see how they've been able to do it. But when you have a great quarterback, and even when he's not playing, but you have a great coach in Sean Payton, it makes it a lot easier to replace and reload. And also, too, the culture that you have in your organization as well. I think that speaks volumes to what the Saints have done over the past few years.
One of the marquee matchups in Week 13 is Sunday in Nashville. The Cleveland Browns take on the Tennessee Titans, a battle of 8-3 teams. Since this game's in Nashville, we start there with Titans correspondent Corey Curtis. Corey, finish this sentence for me, please. If Derrick Henry keeps running like he did against the Colts on Sunday, the Tennessee Titans will
not finish 9-7 for the 5th year in a row. I'm confident they can get to 10 victories if Derrick Henry can keep running the football the way he is. His last 2 Decembers have been utterly spectacular, and people here are kind of on pins and needles waiting to see what he does this year. But the questions are starting to come. How big is this workload for Derrick Henry going to be? Because the carries are already piling up, and how much will he have left when the postseason gets here?
Yeah, the last time we had you on Big Game Bound, the Titans were getting ready for a brutal stretch. Colts, Ravens, and Colts again. Well, they lost that first game to the Colts. We're in overtime against the Ravens. Then Henry breaks one. How big was that win for this team's season?
Well, look, they had lost 3 out of 4 before they went to Baltimore and to Indy. That was a real character check for this team, and those were 2 statement victories for this team. After losing a bad game to the Bengals and after getting drubbed at home in the second half by Indianapolis, this team looked in the mirror and answered the bell. And to go to Indianapolis, a place that has been in a literal house of horrors for them, and to hand it to the Colts the way they did, a very satisfying moment for fans here in Nashville. But that was the #1 offense in the NFL and the #2 defense in the NFL. And to give it to them the way they did in that game makes this team feel a heck of a lot better about itself.
Yeah, and the Colts did not recover last week. 2 of the Titans' 3 losses have come against teams from the NFC North. The Browns are next. Cleveland has squeaked out 3 straight wins, all against sub-500 teams. What are the Titans saying about this game?
Well, we just got a hold of these guys on Wednesday. We all know the Browns are 8-3, and we know they haven't beaten a lot of people. But the simple fact is, you look at this Browns team, and the Titans see a team that's a lot like themselves. They want to run the ball first behind Kevin Stefanski, and then they've got a defense that the Titans know has got pass rushers. When you've got Olivier Vernon with 7 sacks, Myles Garrett with 9.5 sacks, Sheldon Richardson with 5.5 sacks, it's going to be a test for the Titans' offensive line. So the Titans are preparing to try to protect Ryan Tannehill. We have seen a lot of 7, even 8-man protection the last few weeks with Garrett, Vernon, and Richardson. You're going to see a lot more of it this week. The Titans are ready to defend the run and to block against the pass rush.
For the Browns' perspective, we're joined by John Telich in Cleveland. John, who played quarterback for the Browns the last time Cleveland was this excited about its football team?
Well, I would have to say it was Bernie Kosar in the mid-'80s, Jack, and here's a real interesting scenario. One of the fans that was so enamored by Bernie Kosar was affected so much that he hates the coach that got rid of him. That fan, Mike Vrabel, grew up in Northeast Ohio, head coach of the Titans, will never forgive Bill Belichick for getting rid of Bernie Kosar back in 1993. In the day that Bernie Kosar was let go by Art Modell and by Bill Belichick, it was as if there was a funeral citywide. The only thing missing was people standing on the corners as the hearse went by. It was amazing.
And there's been a Bill Belichick curse in Cleveland since. Is there another Browns team that this reminds you of?
It kind of reminds me of 1985. That was when Mack and Biner, that's Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner, both ran for 1,000 yards each, and Bernie Kosar was a rookie quarterback, and they said, let's make things simple, let him hand the ball off to these guys and let them do most of the work. Here we are in 2020, and you have a young quarterback in Baker Mayfield handing the ball off to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, this is a really good backfield. How confident is this team, John? They're 8-3, but those last 3 wins were by 2 points over the 1-win Jags, 5 over the 3-win Eagles, and a field goal against the Texans. Are they as good as the record says they are?
Well, I think a lot of people point to the fact that they had one of the easiest schedules in the National Football League. And, of course, you don't get to pick who you play. You just play them, and they've done very, very well. Their confidence level comes from their young coach, their rookie coach, Kevin Stefanski. He had none of the advantages of a rookie coach. You know, you get an extra week or so. You get an extra OTA. None of that stuff. It was all Zoom meetings in the spring and get ready for your football team and building them literally from Zooms to the practice field. And you are absolutely right. The Browns have won a lot of games against teams that they should be beating and teams with not very good records. And when you compare them to the gang down in Tennessee, Tennessee has had very much better fortunes against good teams, like beating the Bills by a whole bunch. And then also they had good scenario, too, in contest against the Steelers and the Ravens. The Steelers beat them by just 3, and they beat the Ravens.
All right, COVID seems to have struck the Browns, especially that defensive lineman room. Are they going to have a similar problem to the one the Broncos had at quarterback? Because this would be a really bad week not to have your defensive lineman. That Henry fella is pretty good.
Yeah, well, they do have guys on their practice squad that can play the position. In fact, on Wednesday, they signed Jamal Davis, former Akron Zip from Northeast Ohio, so he's on the practice squad. He could be playing. But they've been very good, and Kevin Stefanski has stressed this a lot, Jack, the way they do their contact tracing. Everybody's on board with that. So they've had a guy test positive here or there, but no real big outbreaks because of that. So in some ways, in this 2020 world, that's good news.
How important is a guy like Jack Conklin this week? He spent the first 4 years of his career in Tennessee. Has he been summoned into the coach's office to help with the game plan?
Well, Jack, I'd say he'd been into the coach's office if they'd allow him because of COVID-19. But I'm obviously joking. He is absolutely a guy that you can go to school with to help you in your preparations. But this is going to be a great scenario this coming Sunday. You have the Browns who can run the ball very well. You have Derrick Henry who can run the ball, thanks very much last season and seasons before, with guys like Jack Conklin on his line. So when Conklin became a Brown, he said, I'm going to help Nick Chubb win the NFL rushing title. And right now, Chubb and Hunt both have about 700 yards each. So apparently Mr. Conklin's doing his job.
Another COVID storyline is taking place in San Francisco, where the 49ers are a team without a home. Santa Clara County has banned contact sports for 3 weeks, so the 49ers can't practice or play in their home facilities. Their Monday night game against the Bills has been moved to State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, where the Cardinals play. Kate Rooney is our 49ers correspondent. She joins us from San Francisco. Kate, how big of an inconvenience is this for the 49ers?
Yeah, it is, Jack. I think the hardest part for this team is going to be moving their lives away, that personal life aspect, getting to come home to your family after practice every day. Now they're not going to be able to do that anymore. In fact, Raheem Mostert, after the game on Sunday, was quite emotional, thinking about being away from his little son, his newborn baby, and his wife, potentially for the next 3 weeks and maybe even longer. So that's going to be tough on them. That being said, I think the team is actually uniquely equipped from a football perspective to be able to weather this pretty well. First of all, they're familiar with that stadium. They play there at least once a year because the Cardinals are a divisional opponent. And secondly, they've done the staying on the road thing a couple times. In the last few seasons when they've had back-to-back road games, rather than come back to the Bay Area, they've made a point of staying in that Eastern time zone or staying in that Central time zone and getting familiar with the facilities and stadiums around there and playing in a number of different places, learning how to play anywhere, basically. So they have done that several times, like I said, and I think that this experience will help them be able to weather this challenge a little bit better than some of the other teams in the NFL who might not have ever done anything like that before.
Yeah, so we know they're going to be on the road. How will they prepare for these next couple of games when they can't practice in their own facilities?
Yeah, well, Kyle Shanahan said on Tuesday that they're pretty much moving their entire operation down to Glendale for the time being. They'd explored the possibility of practicing elsewhere, but it just made the most sense to be down in Arizona, have everything in Arizona, and they're going to make their hotel down there their home base. That's where all their team meetings are going to take place. That's where all their Zoom calls are going to be taking place. That's where the players who aren't even playing, who are injured, are going to come down to rehab at the facilities in Arizona now, and they'll be practicing at the training camp facility that the Cardinals use in the summertime. So they have a whole setup there. Everything's going to be in one location. It's pretty convenient, kind of like being in a bubble. You know, they're going to have to take a week or so to adjust to it and figure things out, but it's going to be, to use a phrase that we've all heard a lot of this year, it's going to be their new normal soon enough.
All right, so the 49ers just snapped that 3-game losing skid with a win over the Rams. Where did that come from?
Well, I think one thing that you have to note about the 49ers this season is that kind of the mark of this team has been inconsistency, right? There have been a bunch of games where it seemed like they should have won. The Dolphins game comes to mind. There have been some games that it felt like they should have lost, that they didn't, like this Rams game. And I think you can attribute a lot of it to the spark of getting some of the players who had been on the injured reserve list back. I'm talking about Richard Sherman, who hadn't played since week 1. Raheem Mostert, who had been on and off the injured reserve list a couple times this year, was finally healthy. Deebo Samuel, who's such a workhorse, a spark plug for this team, and he was finally healthy after coming back off that hamstring injury. So I think having a lot of those guys in the game gave Nick Mullins a little more confidence at quarterback. It gave the defense, which has been playing relatively well considering the number of practice squad guys they've had to use this year, a little bit of extra confidence as well. And so they were just able to say, hey, we've beaten this team once before. We know we can do it again. We're going to come out there and try to clean up any mistakes we've had in previous weeks. They were able to accomplish that. I think it's going to give them a lot of confidence to be able to charge forward for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, injuries really have been an issue for that team. After the Bills, Washington, Dallas, 2 division opponents to finish the season. Can they still climb out of this hole they dug themselves into and earn one of those wild card spots?
Well, mathematically they can, right? But it's kind of like what I was just talking about. They should, in theory, be able to beat the Washington football team in Dallas, even with some of their second and third string guys. They should be able to hang in there with divisional opponents, guys that you see twice a year, that you've scouted better than any of the other teams in the NFL. But the consistency has not been there for the 49ers this season. There's some speculation that maybe Jimmy Garoppolo could be ready to come back for a game or two at the end of the season. Nick Mullins has definitely been up and down. He's only won 1 game in the starts that he's made this season so far. I think that's going to be a big factor. And whether they can stay healthy. They can't afford to have any more guys injured. If they keep having recurring injuries, if they have to send more guys to the IR, if they have more guys that they have to send to the reserve COVID-19 list, which has also been a big factor for the 49ers this season, it's going to be really tough, even against a couple teams that you might want to call relative cupcakes coming up in the next couple weeks after the Bills game. So can they do it? I think they can. Is it going to be a really difficult task? Almost insurmountable, Jack.
Our big guest this week is one of the best in the business. John Clayton started covering in the NFL in 1972. In 2007, he was inducted into the writers' wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He joins us now from Seattle. John, thanks for being here. The league closed all practice facilities for 2 days this week. 49ers can't play home games, and the Broncos had to play a wide receiver at quarterback on Sunday. Do you think this season makes it to the finish line?
I do, because they're doing everything possible. And you can see that's with today's game with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. They're trying to do everything humanly possible to get this thing in. And they waited basically in this game to the last minute, because if there was going to be a couple positive tests, more players from Baltimore, then this would have to create a Week 18, and they definitely do not want to do this. And so in the end, I think they're doing the right thing, and they've so far been able to make it through 12 weeks of the season. There's 5 weeks left. And so after that, I think that they can do a pretty good job. But overall, I think they've done a good job. And I know the numbers came out today as far as the positive tests. And it's been going up. In October, it was 8 per week. And this is on the players. Then, of course, you go into October, beginning of that, it was in the teens, 15 to 17. It was 28 last week and 35 this week. It is increasing, but not to a point yet where it's going to wipe out the rest of the season.
John, we've seen the league move games around, like you just mentioned. Was it fair to make the Broncos play that game? Should the league have moved that game, or were they sending a message?
No, they did the right thing in doing it, because what caused the problem? The Denver Broncos caused the problem. You had 4 quarterbacks that in an approved meeting, and then, of course, I did give the Broncos credit because they said, okay, we want to have a meeting with the 4 quarterbacks. They say, fine, go ahead and do it. But they didn't wear masks, or at least didn't wear masks long enough, and they didn't test positive, but they were in high-risk area as far as the contact tracing. And so because of that, they had to go on the COVID's list, and that's the fault of the Denver Broncos. And why would the Broncos think the same way? Well, they actually fined all 4 players for not wearing the masks.
All right, so the Lions sent Matt Patricia and their GM Bob Quinn packing on Saturday. This franchise has 1 playoff win in the Super Bowl era. Why can't they get it right? And if you were the person making this decision, who's at the top of your wish list?
You always have to put it on ownership a lot of times, because they're the ones making the decision. And the one thing about the Ford family is that they say a little more patient than most owners, which I don't think is a bad thing, but you have to get the right coaches. And they haven't been able to get the right coaches. They've had the right quarterback since 2009 in Matthew Stafford, but the problem is they've not surrounded him with enough that he could win a playoff game. And so you look at that and you go, okay, and again, this is where the mistakes are made. Here they had Jim Caldwell, who had 2 back-to-back 9-7 seasons. Well, they fired him because they said, oh, he wasn't winning against winning teams. So then they bring in Matt Patricia, who was pretty much a disaster, and he wins 13 games in a little over 2.5 years. Did that work out? Now what they need to do, I don't know, Robert Saleh of the San Francisco 49ers could be a consideration, a Detroit native. Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator right now, is an interim coach, would have a chance for the job. But really, when you look at the job, it's going to shake away too many of the people that might want it, some of the good people. And kind of here, I'll throw one out there. What about Jim Harbaugh in Michigan? Because I think right now he could be in trouble. And if that's going to be the case, Harbaugh going to Detroit, that could be a good thing.
All right, we've seen coaching changes in Detroit, Atlanta, Houston. You just mentioned a couple of names to expect. Who are some of the others, names that you expect to be at the top of the market?
But the guys at the top of the list, I mean, naturally you always start with the offensive guys. And I think, you look at, the Northwestern coach, I think he's going to be in consideration. Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, he's hot. Arthur Smith in Tennessee is going to be a hot candidate. I think the main one is going to be Eric Bieniemy of the Kansas City Chiefs, which you kind of wonder, could that be a pairing? Because if you get Bieniemy, I think he could team up with John Dorsey as a general manager, because John Dorsey worked with him in Kansas City. So those are going to be some of the top names, but it's going to be a scramble. I think there are going to be as many as 8 or 9 jobs that could be open.
John, you brought up Jim Harbaugh. Would you be surprised to see him back on an NFL sideline after what's turning into a disaster in Ann Arbor?
No, not at all. I think he would not mind getting back in the league. Certainly he's going to have value around colleges because he is such a good coach. But the one job that I think would be in the natural is not going to open for him, and that would be the Miami Dolphins. Stephen Ross is a big booster, maybe the biggest booster of Michigan football, and certainly is a big supporter of Jim Harbaugh. And, Stephen screwed up the first time in not hiring Harbaugh to go to the Miami Dolphins. And so what ended up happening is that he goes to San Francisco and gets the team to the Super Bowl. And so now I think that with Brian Flores doing such a good job that they're in the playoff hunt, there's not going to be an opening there. But there's enough openings, I think, for Jim Harbaugh. I think some people wonder, hey, would it be the New York Jets? Could be.
How crazy has this year been for you, John? Because I know you're used to being in NFL stadiums. You're used to being all over the place. And now you're home in Seattle, right?
Well, here's how crazy it is. I do the opposing team sidelines on a Seahawk broadcast. And again, doing the sideline stuff is one of the favorite things that I've done since covering football since 1972. It is a blast. But how am I covering it? I'm covering it from home, not at the games. I'm not at the stadium. I'm at home, keeping in touch with the PR people to get the injury updates, doing all kind of analysis on different things that happen during the game. But that's how crazy it is. So here it is that I don't go to games because I could be going to them for the Washington Post. Certainly just go to any game I want to go, but I'm not traveling. The last time I got in a plane was at the Combine in Indianapolis, going back and forth there. And so it's not a good time to travel right now, so I'm not.
Do you miss it, or do you kind of enjoy maybe the lower key nature of this?
No, I miss it. I love being at games. I love covering this sport. I mean, you can see for doing it for so long and loving it so much, I want more, and more. Well, getting the less is still good enough, but I'd like to be at the games. I mean, would like to be at that Pittsburgh-Baltimore game. Certainly some of the games this weekend. And of course, I'd be at all the Seahawk games because I'm doing the opposing team sidelines, but nobody's traveling, so I stay at home.
Kenny White is the Wizard of Odds. He's an odds maker, a sports market analyst. You can see him on CBS Sportsline. He's also the author and publisher of Kenny White's College Football Power Ratings. You can get that in a PDF or a 3-hole binder. He predicts the final score for every college football game, basically tells you what the odds and the total should be for every game. And he joins us each week from Vegas. Kenny, from the time we taped to the time the Broncos played last, they lost all 3 of their quarterbacks because of COVID and had to play a receiver off their practice squad at QB. What kind of an impact did that have on the line?
The largest in the history of sports betting. Jack, is amazing. Yeah, I've never seen an NFL game move 11 points. So it was -6 at the time the information came out, -17 at closing. And it was really nothing but Saints money, and I don't blame them. They were an easy winner, and really the NFL I thought they would give the Broncos a better chance of picking up a quarterback or putting someone in place that would be able to play quarterback. That was just a really tough situation for the Broncos.
Yeah, surprised they didn't at least move that to Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, now that we know they can move it to Wednesday. The last week you mentioned the biggest impact on a line is at quarterback when they make a change. What does a coaching change do to the one they just made in Detroit?
Well, every team's different on coaching changes, but it definitely gives a team a boost. There's been 2 this year already. We saw the Atlanta Falcons start out 0-5. They're 4-2 straight up NATS since they made a change. And then the Houston Texans, they were 0-4, but they're 4-3 straight up and 4-3 ATS since they're firing. So both those teams have improved about 2.5 to 3 points on their power rating over that time. So look for an uptick from the Lions.
All right, how about when a team is forced out of its home like the 49ers? Any change there?
During a normal regular season where there are fans, yes, the 49ers home field's worth about 3 points to them. But over COVID now with no fans, really the only thing that they would have in their advantage is a team traveling to their destination. Now they have to travel. The other team has to travel. So now there's no advantage whatsoever for the 49ers in these games. So that hurts them just a little bit. This year would have hurt them a lot more in a normal year with fans.
Underdogs went 8-4 against the spread last week. Who cleaned up?
Anytime those dogs are barking like that, it's the sports books. And those dogs have been barking now for a good 5-6 weeks. It has been a great run for sports books worldwide. I'll tell you that. The bettors have been taking it on the chin in the NFL.
Eagles went for the 2-point conversion late in the game. Seemed meaningless, but who took it in the shorts when they decided to do that?
Oh, boy, was that ever bad for the players again. The bettors were laying 6.5. 6.5 in that game, and a lot of the money was at 6.5, the little $20, $30 bettors. So very shocking that the Eagles would go for 2 there, because it was a meaningless 2. You get the extra point, you keep it on 7, you try the onside kick. Very, very strange to see that happen.
All right, Kenny, I'm a Heisman voter. I know this is going to be a very difficult year to pick my top 3 because it's not an even playing field. How much of an impact is this having on the line for the Heisman?
Yeah, it really hasn't had a lot of impact. I guess well, the odds are the odds, but it has impacted certain players that they haven't had enough opportunities. Justin Fields for Ohio State has 13 touchdown passes in just 113 attempts. This guy would have close to 30 right now. He'd be battling Kyle Trask for the award. Trask is the favorite right now. Mac Jones second. Running back wise. Yeah, we talk about, you mentioned to me, Jared Patterson from Buffalo, 4 games. He has 920 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. If he played 8 games, he'd have 32 rushing touchdowns right now. I think we'd be talking about him, but we're not even talking about Bryce Hall from Iowa State, who's one of the best running backs in the country. The only running back mentioned is Najee Harris from Alabama, who has 873 yards in 8 games, 17 touchdowns. Patterson's done that in 4 games.
We're out of time. A reminder, no Thursday game in the NFL this week, but thanks to all the COVID changes, we do have 3 games on Monday. The regularly scheduled game is Bills and 49ers. That's on ESPN. Washington and Pittsburgh. That game's been moved to 5 o'clock on Fox. And then you've got Dallas and the Ravens. That is a Monday night game at 8 o'clock on Fox and the NFL Network. A big thanks to our guests, Jared Payton, Corey Curtis, John Telich, Kate Rooney, John Clayton, and Kenny White. For our producer, Spencer Wheelock, and the rest of our crew here in Grand Rapids, I'm Jack Doles. Have a great weekend.